taught at the Wheaton College, where he was also chair of this department that has this long name: Biblical Studies and Archaeology and Theology and World Religions. Yes. Good. No, it's back up again. He's also the author of several books, and you'd be interested in some of these. One of the topics is Israel and Egypt, that you may have seen, the evidence for the authenticity of the Exodus tradition. We're going to get the synopsis of that today, right? No, all right. You got to read the book, sorry. You got to read the book. And one of the other, I'm interested in this, in his the reading here. He's edited a book called Abortion, A Christian Understanding and Response in 1987. Dr. Hoffmeier has a wide breadth, and we're delighted to have him here and to make this presentation. Dr. Hoffmeier.
I very much appreciate being said to have a wide breadth. It's a wide girth I'm worried about. Well, I flew in last night from Chicago, and what I missed by flying here, the 3 hours plus to fly from Chicago here, is basically the 3.5-hour class I have Tuesday night. So since I didn't get to do my 3.5-hour lecture last night, there probably is little doubt that the biblical Exodus story is one that has intrigued Christians, Jews, and people from many different religious traditions. No doubt, for Old Testament theology, the Exodus event is the most profound event, and the consequent activities of the Israelites in Sinai with the revelation of Mount Sinai, to giving the Ten Commandments, these two events, the Exodus and the Sinai tradition, Sinai wilderness tradition, are the two pillars upon which Old Testament theology is based. And until recently, very few historians and biblical scholars questioned the authenticity of these biblical narratives. In fact, as recently as 1981, in the third edition of his History of Israel, John Bright said there can be little doubt that the ancestors of Israel had been slaves in Egypt and had escaped in some marvelous way. Almost no one today would question it. That was 1981. A lot was to change in the years following that. 10 years later, in a book authored by Robert Coote, he makes this bold assertion. The writers of ancient Israel knew little or nothing about the origin of Israel. Although the scriptures can provide much information relevant to the investigation of early Israel. The period under discussion, therefore, does not include the period of the patriarchs, Exodus, conquest, or judges, as devised by the writers of scriptures. These periods never existed. And he teaches at a seminary. Regarding the 400-year sojourn of the Israelites in Egypt, Danish scholar Niels Peter Lemke makes the following statement. The silence of Egyptian sources as to the presence of Israel in the country is an obstacle to the notion of Israel's 400-year sojourn. The argument basically goes like this. There's no evidence in Egypt, after 200 years of Egyptology, that would support the biblical tradition. Now, I could spend almost all the time today talking about the nature of archaeological evidence and its limitations and what it can tell us and what it can't tell us. The time will allow that. I am giving a lecture somewhere on Friday morning, and logically, it would have been better to start with that one than to go to this one, but I have PowerPoint for this, so it's a lot cooler. So we're going to slide for that one. But in that presentation Friday morning, I will actually be talking about the evidence that supports the biblical story of the Israelites in bondage, making bricks, that sort of material. So, in a sense, Dr. Hoffmeier, that lecture will summarize some of the material in my book, Israel in Egypt. I'm happy to say that I just signed a contract to write a sequel to this book called Israel in Sinai. So you're getting a preview of that here. And one of the things that intrigued me was, what do we know about the places mentioned in the Exodus narratives, where the Bible says the Israelites started and where they went to, and in order to get to Sinai for this encounter with God. Now, the biblical references are in agreement. Exodus 12:37 tells us that the people of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot. Similarly, we have that report also in Numbers 33. I don't have that up here, but Numbers 33 contains an itinerary that tracks the Israelite movements from Ramesses till their arrival by the Jordan River, ready to cross before the death of Moses. But one interesting note here, and this is Exodus 13:17 through 20, where we're told that when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although it was near, lest the people repent, literally in Hebrew, shuv, turn around, turn back, when they see war and return to Egypt. That intrigued me. What was it out there that God did not want them to confront? What was the war they might see that would turn them back? I'll talk a little bit about that on Friday morning. But when we get down to Exodus 14, where did God lead them? The Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back. There's that word shuv, or sometimes translated repent, same word in Hebrew, and encamp in front of Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon, and you shall encamp over against the sea. And what intrigued me is that if you look at any Bible map, any Bible atlas, or better yet, look at lots of Bible atlases, and you'll see all kinds of people putting dots on the map, suggesting where these places might be, but they don't have a clue. And for good reason. Sinai, especially the northern part of Sinai, has been a battleground for the past 50 years, occupied by the Israelis, back and forth since 1948, and during the late 60s, early 70s, extensive archaeological work was done by Israelis. Professor Eliezer Oren did a lot of survey work, identified sites, but didn't have time to dig any of these. And so what interests me is, can we identify any of these places? In other words, can we go to a map and reconstruct based on geographical, geological, and archaeological evidence where these places might be, and which is the sea, or the Sea of Reeds, as the Hebrew reads, that is R-E-A-D-S, as the Hebrew text reads, the Sea of Reeds. Where would that be if we could identify these, or any of these three locations? Now, tomorrow or Friday, I will talk a little bit about Pi Hahiroth, and I just don't have time today to deal with that. Now, if you look at this map, the Bible tells us the Israelites settled in the area of the land of Goshen, or the land of Ramesses, which is the northeastern delta. Ramesses the Great built a capital city, which he named Ramesses, after himself. Ramesses is the house of Ramesses. And it's located right in this area here. I think there's another map which is a little bit better. Yeah. If you look at some of your early Bible atlases, what we talked about this Friday, many archaeologists identified ancient cannons where Indiana Jones found the, you know about that. This site was thought to be Ramesses, and we'll talk on Friday about why it's not. But actually, Ramesses is now located in this area. Two very important sites being excavated. The site of Avarna, the Hyksos capital, by the Austrian archaeologist, Monsieur Bietak, and across town, Ramesses, currently being excavated by German archaeologists. But this is the area that the Bible calls the land of Goshen. And the route that the Israelites would have traveled on if they were leaving Egypt, very logically, would be the so-called Derek HaPelishtim, the way or the route to the Philistine area. And one would imagine that this would go somewhere around here or like this and up the coast. But we're told specifically that God did not lead them that way. I'll talk more about that on Friday because so some of you aren't there, won't be there. Let me just say that in the 1980s, a very large fort was discovered on this narrow strip of land right here where that dark blob is. A fort, the measurement of which is about 800 yards long by 400 yards wide. A massive fort that was built there that spanned the century. So wherever you wanted to dig the X's, it was there. And if the Israelites would have gone out this way, they would have encountered this fort, and the Mediterranean Sea was here, and there was a lake on this side of it, and they would have just walked right into a trap. We now know why God didn't lead them that way. So a very important detail of the biblical text that few could have understood before 1986. Now, this map is to show us that going back to 1920, Sir Alan Gardner, a very famous Egyptologist, who had little love for the Bible, but brilliant Egyptologist. If you're studying Egyptology, you're probably using his grammar, Sir Alan Gardner's grammar. He proposed that the military road that went from Egypt to Palestine was based on, and this was based on texts from the Papyrus Anastasia I, and based on a relief from of Seti I, the father of Ramses, from around 1300 BC, at Karnak Temple in Egypt. And he suggested that this military route went along this way, and he identified the starting point of this route, which was the frontier town called Sharu, and the sequence of sites on both of these sources, that is, the Papyrus Anastasia and the relief at Karnak, both agree in the names of the sequence of forts. The first was called Sharu, the second was called the Mansion of the Lion, and the third was called the Migdal of Seti, or Seti Merneptah, who was Pharaoh Seti I. And Gardner, back in 1920, proposed that Migdal Seti, the name of this fort, and the Semitic word Migdal means fort or tower, the defensive structure, that he suggested that that was the same as Migdal of the Bible, of Exodus 14:2. And he identified it with this site here called Tel El Her. Now, Gardner made these suggestions in the absence of any archaeological excavations at any of these sites. All these sites have now been excavated. This was gone, thanks to a new canal in the area. This site, which I first visited in 1994, and thought, gee, this would be a great site to dig, but God in His providence had other plans, and fortunately this turned out to be a Roman and Ptolemaic period site, and not Pharaonic, and so it was a good thing I didn't waste time and money there. This site turned out to be a late Christian Islamic site, and Tel El Her, which is now being excavated by the French, is a Greco-Roman period site with the earliest remains being from the Persian period. So not one of these sites could be dated back to the 14th, 15th centuries, the period of Moses and the Exodus. I have been interested in this area for some time and done different types of survey work, collaborated with geologists, and was very interested in finding a site that would span between the 15th through 12th, 13th century. In 1998, when I first, in 1998, when I was there with my geologist colleague, Dr. Steve Mosier, we heard on our very last day of a site called Tellenborg, right here at the star, that had pottery from the New Kingdom period, or the 15th through 13th century. And our antiquities department colleague said, yes, if you just go down the road, and you'll see a tree on the left, and it's behind that tree. Now, this is desert, so a tree is an important landmark. And we went, found the tree, we looked behind it, found nothing. And we saw him that night, we were just getting ready to leave. He said, oh, it's about 3-4 kilometers away from the tree. We didn't say that, but we never got there. But we had this information, and I remember getting on the plane, flying back to Chicago, and saying, Lord, I want to be at that site. it's going to cost $100,000 or more a year to dig. Where am I going to get the money? That was May. In July, I have a phone call. The man introduces himself, and I got a lot of interesting phone calls from people wanting to tell me their theory about the Exodus. Here's another guy. And I was getting ready to leave to go away for 2 weeks to Romania where I was teaching. And I was very polite. I said, well, I'll give you a call when I get back. And I said, I have to call this guy. I told him I'd call him. I'll call him. I called him, and he said, I'm interested in the Exodus. I'm reading your book, Israel and Egypt. And he said, I think it would be worth our while to get together and talk about this. So we got together. He drove up a big red Jaguar. That was a good sign. And I told him about this site, and I told him if we could find the site of Migdal, then we might be able to identify the body of water near it. It could be, suitable for life. It would be a reef. He said, that makes sense. I'm prepared to support this. He said, I'm not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm talking about $5 million over the next 10 to 15 years. And, of course, I had to go to the bathroom. What am I doing? But anyway, so we have now completed two seasons of excavation there, and what I'd like to share you a little bit about our work. This is one of our, maybe somebody can close the blind, or you might be able to see a little bit better if light coming in from this way. But the site is very unimpressive when you go to it first, but you can see some signs of human, maybe that map sign that's mounting off of here. I'd like to see in the map. I know where that one is. Well, there must be one up to the other side. Oh well. I know what they look like, but it doesn't matter to me. For your benefit. We did see pieces of limestone laying around. There's a bit of a granite piece sticking out, and we could tell the site had been an Israeli army base. The Egyptian army had been there. Roads had been put across it. It looked most unpromising as an archaeological site. A canal cut through it, and here was the site, roads running through it, water pipes, and it looked really like quite a mess. But in January 7th or 8th, 2000, I walked along that canal embankment while my colleagues were doing the topographical survey work in anticipation of excavations, and I said, I wonder, as these guys went through here 4 years ago digging up, could they have turned over some things that nobody noticed or wanted to notice prior? And this statue is staring up through the sand at me. It's a relief, I should say, on a block. And it's an Egyptian deity. And based on the art historical nature of it, it appears to be a Ramesside period, that'd be 13th century on. And there's just a partial name of the Horus name of the king with the horn of a bull. Unfortunately, there are about 8 kings from this general period whose name is Strong Bull arising in Thebes. But in any event, we felt we were in the ballpark. We also found this block, which you can see is about 60 centimeters long with its life size, showing the arm. And any of my Egyptologist friends here will probably be able to recognize this particular pose. It's an archer's pose. The king on his chariot firing arrows, and so that's a royal battle scene. And we also found this, which was a cartouche with Tutmosis, almost certainly Tutmosis III, who reigned from 1479 to 1425 BC. So we, with much excitement, returned to start digging, and this is a team from this past season, our second season, but here is the venerable Harvey Miller, who writes out the checks. And he's very worried about going back this year, as you can understand. We've conducted some ground-penetrating magnetometry work to identify features below the surface to help narrow down our search. This is Dr. Stephen Mosier, my geologist, and the work he has done has just been fantastic. I'll show you some of that in a moment. Part of what we're trying to do is to reconstruct the paleo environment of this region from 3,200 to 3,500 years ago. In other words, what did a map in that day look like, not what the map looked like today. Most of our Bible atlases take the present day map that they're putting dots and lines and having people moving around. That may have nothing to do with reality, as you will see a little bit later on. Here's the canal that's cutting through our site. And the blocks that we found, the arm was down here. Now we're excavating them. And we found this is a lot. This is 80 centimeters. But this is a brief inscription which the king is actually giving to you. Usually he's giving him a sword to go and conquer his enemies. We found this is a nice piece. This is the royal belly button right there, and the king's kilt, and these lines going off are the harnesses. This is a chariot, king in his chariot in battle, and you see the quiver on the side of it where he would keep his weapons. And so we have a second battle scene. And in case you were thinking the arm that you saw earlier might go with this, there are two different scales. So we have a couple different battle scenes. As soon as I realized we had Ramesside period materials, the wonderful thing about digital cameras and being able to print this stuff out in the middle of nowhere, and even send things like FedEx from nearby Ismailia to Liverpool, England. I sent this stuff off to Professor Kenneth Kitchen to begin looking at it, and who was the world's foremost Ramesside scholar. And he was very enthusiastic about our finds because from this period, the Ramesside period, no blocks with these particular type of decorations have been found north of Abydos in Greece. Nothing like this has been found even at the Ramesside capital, Ramesses or at Tanis. So we have some unique materials. Here's that granite block that we hoped would contain inscriptions. We did find fragments of granite with inscriptions around it, but this actual block itself had no inscription on it, but about a 5-6 ton block that had to have come from over 600 miles away from Aswan. How did that get there? So it was very impressive, but no inscriptions on this particular block. We also found a very strange feature that looked like a crater because this had been a military camp. We thought, well, perhaps this had been where some artillery or a tank had been dug in and fired off towards the Suez Canal. We're about 6 miles east of the Suez Canal in Sinai. And this curious crater, our Bedouin guard who stayed at the site, and hopefully he's there today, mining shop for us, said, when I was a kid, I remember being here with my father, and we saw some stone stairs going down. And of course, I'm thinking, well, what used here with your dad doing? Probably what Bedouin do, rob archaeological sites. But anyway, we cleared this out and look at all these blocks that we found. And once we cleared the mess out, these are the actual holes the robbers made. And this is our square on top of it. Here you can see the steps this guy remembered seeing as a kid. And for my Egyptological colleagues here, these are caliphats. These are the kind of blocks used by Akhenaten for his building projects, the so-called monotheistic king. But these blocks were reused, not in original context. And it goes down to who knows where. And that's as far as we got in the year 2000. But from this context, we discovered 2 handles, pottery handles with stamp seals, and we have the name here of the ephemeral King Sennacherib, who reigned but 3 years after the death of Akhenaten. And of course, you all know his better-known successor, Tutankhamun. So we had King Tut, his either brother or uncle or whoever Sennacherib was, at our site. The boy had Moses III, so we have 18th dynasty materials there. We found some interesting tombs. This is one of the larger tombs from the 2000 season. And the pottery that we found in this and adjacent tombs, we have these 3 vessels are what are called base ring 2, which are from Cyprus and can date to around 1300 BC. And we have these so-called pilgrim flasks, which enable us to date these tombs again to roughly the 13th century BC. Well, after digging for 3-4 weeks, we found tombs, we found evidence of the temple, but we're looking for a fort, and this is the frontier. You don't expect to have tombs and temples out on your frontier. You expect to have forts. And we found no evidence of that whatsoever. Well, one day we picked up this little stone, and the inscription on it is very interesting. It's the great division of Amun. The army of Egypt during the reign of Seti I and Ramses II was made up of 4 divisions, and they're named after 4 principal deities: the division of Amun, the division of Seth, Re, and Ta. And so we know that the division of Re was located at this location during the days of Ramses II, the Surma, Re, Seth, and Re. And we have the name of the officer, who the name is here, his name is Kai, and he's a weapons bearer. And so this is our first clue that we did have a military site. We just didn't know where the fort was. And by the way, Dr. Kitchen says this block is unique. It's only about 6 inches long by 4 inches high. And he thinks that it's actually a nameplate, like a nameplate outside your professor's offices. Do you have one of those? Yeah, he has one of those. And that this is an actual nameplate outside of the officer's quarters. And if so, he says it's unique. There's no parallel to this anywhere in archaeological history, of Egypt, that is. Well, our same Bedouin, Hassan, came to us one day with much excitement and said, along the canal, there's some mud bricks sticking out. And so we went over and started sweeping. This is, again, the edge of this canal that was cut through, and up here is the embankment of the canal. And sure enough, we have a large wall, our first indication of something approaching large enough to be a military site. And we actually thought what we had was a wall here that had partially collapsed. And you can get a closer look at this brick structure. And we left at the end of the 2000 season, realized we had something military, but didn't fully understand what we had. Nearby it, we cleared an area where there was mud all over the place. These are all mud bricks. So you can see these marks. When they were making the canal and flattening the area out, these bulldozers went through in the last 5 years and wreaked considerable havoc over there. In fact, those lines of teeth marks from you can see the size of the shovel, but nearly a yard of brick wall was wiped out in the development of this. Here you can see, here's where that last picture was taken. You can see this large wall, about 14 feet wide. The earlier wall I showed you actually runs parallel to this, just off this picture. Again, cut off when the road beside the canal and all this was made. But so we have a massive fort, and we learned much more about it this past season. But here he turns the corner, starts heading off to the north. As we dug along this face to expose the wall, we found something rather interesting and surprising. And what we have was a very hard-packed surface heading down, and we thought it was some sort of what archaeologists call a glacis. But what we learned later on was that this was a moat. And a little hard to see, but here's the wall and the smooth surface running down into, this would be a dry moat, made of mud. You don't put water in a mud brick structure like that. We also realized this is cutting a trench, trying to reach out outside of the moat, and we realized that this moat had actually been deliberately filled in. It was crushed limestone, and the bits of limestone had some yellow and blue paint, almost certainly indicating that this had been roof material for a temple. So at some point there was a temple out there that was bashed to pieces, and the materials was reused to fill this moat when the second stage of this fort was excavated. This is over the area we think was the temple area. This area was bulldozed by the Israelis in order to elevate their high point. But specifically, all we have left here basically is one brick thick at the very bottom of this thing. The whole superstructure is gone. And these 3 pits may have been where stones would have been placed and a statue of a deity, perhaps. Very typical of Egypt to have these threefold deities, the triads as we call them. So we would like to learn more about this structure. Here's the inset for one of these, for a pier where a block would have fit. So these were actually not dug out, but these were actually built to house a statue or something like this. Here is two of our team getting ready to excavate a new square, and we had done some magnetometry work and found that there was a structure there which we believed would be a tomb, and we were right. And a large tomb, larger than one we had dug the season before, and actually had two chambers, but you couldn't get from chamber 1 to chamber 2. What we realized is that this had been a tomb that was built in one period and expanded in another period, and so actually functioned in two different periods. The people in this area, when they died, were buried in clay coffins, not unlike those found in southern Canaan during the same period. The clay coffins, the so-called Philistine coffins, but these were actually Egyptian. Found a nice little figurehead of the god Anubis, the protector of the dead, and the most happy discovery was this little potsherd was the cartouche of Amenhotep II, the son of Thutmose III. So we had a nice sequence of 18th dynasty kings, Thutmose III, his son Amenhotep II, hiatus, and then we have the Amarna period kings, Menkaure, Tutankhamun, and we've already found a number of blocks, I'll show you one earlier with Ramses II. So the site appears to have been pretty continuously occupied, as one would expect during the Empire period, when Egypt would be protecting its frontier. We returned to that step structure and dug it out completely. When we were visited by Professor Monty Kritak from the Excavations at Tel Aviv, he said, well, obviously you have a fortified pit. Which, of course, why would you fortify a pit? We don't know what this thing was, but perhaps it was part of a well system for going down and obtaining water. It surely could not be a cistern for storing water. There was no sign of plaster. The rock was far too porous. So we're not quite sure what this was. Maybe you have ideas. My benefactor was hoping to be a wine cellar and find some 3,500-year-old wine. I assured him that if he found it, he could have the contents. We went back and further explored the very first wall we found in connection with the fort, and as we cleared it, we found that the mud brick was actually built on top of some limestone blocks and, surprisingly, red brick. If you know archaeology, especially in the Middle East, you're told that you don't find fired brick until the Roman period. And so that was really, what is going on here? We're finding fired brick in a New Kingdom context. Well, our double wall, that thing, it turned out to be a moat. Once we cleared it out, this is the bottom of the moat. What you see, the cut here is made by the bulldozer, and they cut across here in digging around this canal. So we don't know how much higher it would have gone, but this was a moat. And the pottery found in it dates to about the 13th century BC. There we go. That's it all cleared out, looking down towards the water. And we dug on the other side looking for it, and we can't pick up a trace of it this way, and we've done the other direction, can't pick up a trace the other way either. So we're just looking for that. You wonder what soldiers do out in the middle of nowhere? We came back one night after a dust storm, it was all full of sand. So I suspect that most of the time they were digging these things out for their boss. This is the way we had to dig this out again. We bisected it to get an idea of how it was constructed, and here you can see the red brick and limestone that we noticed at the very end. And this is interesting. Again, the fired brick is not supposed to be there 1300 BC. Now, remember the big wall I showed you earlier, the 14-foot wide? We had noticed another wall coming out underneath it back in 2000, and so we wanted to pursue this further this year. And what we've now realized is that is the top of the outside of the moat. So it's about 30 feet across this moat. The wall came along here, but it didn't come out the other side of this. So we figured it had to make a turn somewhere. So what you have to do, archaeology is a discipline of destruction. You excavate, and in the process you destroy. We made a little cut across here to get an idea of where this thing went. Sure enough, it turned to the north. And so this tells us, based on the principles of stratification, that this big 14-foot wide wall was later than the moat, because it was built over top of it. So we felt we could date this big wall to about 1300 BC, and this must be a much earlier phase, probably going back to the mid-15th century BC. Interestingly, this wall, this is the wall that runs north-south, I showed you earlier. When we dug these bricks, I don't know if you can quite see it, but notice how it kind of sags? Well, that's when they built this wall, things settled into the old moat. And so what you're seeing here is where the old moat was, and we can actually trace that wall. So here's the big wall, there's the sag, here's the outside of that moat that you saw the turn here. So we have a huge structure. We don't know how much of it's lost. It heads off towards this bridge, and we want to check on the other side to see if we can pick up the corner. But we did get some other surprises. Here's the moat wall. Here is the big wall, first wall I showed you. And here's a second one that actually cuts through both of these. So we actually had three different phases, probably in about a 200-year period of time. So my point is, and you probably know, the biblical scholars disagree on when the Exodus took place. So whichever period you like, this fort was here. Of course, the big question is, what did it make? And that, of course, we like to find in the inscription to help us out with that. Well, more surprises. Here's the outside of the moat. Here's the very first explosion of the moat I showed you that we discovered in the year 2000. So it's about 30 some feet across here, and you can see all the stones that was filled in deliberately to cover it up and then to make a second fort. And weirdly, we found on the outside of this another stone step structure, and I have other pictures but not here to show you, that this structure appears to be another one of those step structures like I showed you earlier, that steps down to nowhere. We have another one. So we have to clear this one out, but we're not quite sure what that was. As we were cleaning up and brushing off the walls of the moat, lo and behold, an 8-layer wall, foundational wall, of fired bricks appeared. And again, this is an archaeological first to find fired brick. I suspect the reason was because the ground water table was so high that a mud brick wall would simply absorb the water and would turn to mush. And because you're out in the desert, stone would have to be transported hundreds of miles to get to this remote location. But there were swamps and marshes and so on in the area where you could scoop mud and make brick. And they knew how to fire brick, they just didn't use fire brick very often. So this was a very exciting discovery. That's looking back to the inside of the moat and the brick part down below, which they're falling part of it. Now, a little bit on the geology of this and why this is interesting. Here's that this line here represents the coastline about 3,500 years ago. Everything north of here was the Mediterranean 3,500 years ago. And if you've been to a coastal area, you will know that on the east coast, you'll have these barrier islands, and you'll have water between them and the main area of the land. And we had this barrier island here with water, and there was an ancient lake here, and we can actually tell you where there were lakes. This is, by the way, this is a satellite image from the late 1960s, declassified CIA stuff. You can get it on the internet, and then we superimposed on that all these red dots represent where we took samples of soil and analysis and so on. And so what we can tell is there's a big lake here, there's a big lake here, and one of the other big surprises we had is these little blue lines with zigzagging across right through our site. We couldn't figure out why we had the temple area and the cemetery area, and then there was this valley, a little dip, and on the other side of that we found the fort. Well, what we now know is that low-lying valley was a tributary of the Nile that actually flowed out to this area 3,500 years ago. What this means is that, contrary to my proposal in my book in 1997, where I suggested, because we're pretty sure at that point that this site here, Hebwa, was Charlie, which I will talk about a little bit more on Friday. I had thought that perhaps the way of the Philistines the Bible talks about would have gone right out here, followed this ancient coastline, and up into the land of Canaan. What we now know is that this site, which is Pharaonic period, 15th through 13th century, there's another one right here, our site is here. So all the period, if you will, the period of the Exodus, the sites go apparently around this ancient lake. And I think there ought to be one more here, which would be the third in the sequence. I'll talk about that in a moment. So we can abandon the old line of Sir Alan Gardner and replace it with this blue line. So my point was that the Israelites were quite trying to avoid coming up here and getting caught in this trap. But the question, of course, is what is this site, Tel El Borg? There are two scenarios I propose to you. Since we know the sequence of the forts by name, and these come from Papyrus Anastasi 1 and the Seti Karnak list, scenario 1 is that Tel Hevel is Charut. That is now no longer in dispute. In 1999, a statue was excavated which has the name Charu on it in the temple at Tel Hevel. So there's no doubt that that is Charu, the border town of Egypt. Across about 1.5 mile between Hevel, there is a band of water, part of an ancient lake system. On the other side is another site which the archaeologists call Hevel II. And one wonders, are these sister cities on the other side of the water, and both of them constitute Charu. About 3 miles away is our site, Tel El Borg. And the second site in the sequence is called the Mansion of the Lion. So one scenario would have it that our site is the Mansion of the Lion. We'd like to find a text and settle it. Right now we don't have it. Scenario 2 is to take Hevel 1 as Charu, Hevel 2, the site just across the water, as the Mansion of the Lion, and Tel El Borg as the Migdal of Menma'atre, the third in the sequence. Now, one thing that's attractive about this is that the Arabic name Borg means power, and the Hebrew term Migdal means power. Now, that's an interesting correlation, but is that just coincidental? Is the Arab name Tel El Borg because the Israelis just built up a little watchtower that they used during the 60s for keeping an eye on things? And so it's just coincidental. So I'm not prepared to make the identification just yet. Obviously, the description will settle it. What we need to do is go maybe another 3-4 miles to the south around that ancient lake, and the next site should be Migdal of Menma'atre. And if that's so, then we may have the first dot we can securely put on that. I want to go back to the beginning. Can you do that for me? Right back to the beginning. I want to show one of the maps at the very beginning. Yeah, you can do that. Click on there. Okay. And if you can click on that map. Okay. I'm sorry, that's perfect. Now, what we now know is that there were all these lakes. We had the Mediterranean Sea. This has all been confirmed. This was a proposal made in the 1970s by Manfred Bietak and published in his volume, Telesaba Volume 2. However, work in the 1990s by Daniel Stanley from the Smithsonian, who's done extensive core drilling across this area, has really confirmed this, that this was the coastline 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, and that on the other side of this barrier island was a body of water. Now it's interesting that there's this other lake, which in Arabic is called the Balak Lake, is the one that we trace all the way up to very near our site. And what's interesting is that we know that there is a body of lakes, a body of water, that in Egyptian text was called Patufi, that is the reeds, the body of reeds. And I wonder if indeed this body of water is what the biblical writers call the Sea of Reeds. And what's interesting is the Hebrew word "suf" is actually the Egyptian word "suf." And if that's so, that this would be the body of water, and perhaps one of the sites along here, either our site or next site over, is Migdal. I'm going to talk about the Hoffmeier on Friday, but that is another interesting piece of the puzzle. But if so, let's go back to the beginning. You have the Israelites leaving from somewhere here, heading off for Sukkot, the Bible tells us. And we know where that is, because there's an Egyptian site called Chepu, which is down here. When they get down here, we're told that they turned, they headed backward. And that's why I wonder if they had come up and were trying to get around here, and that's where they would encounter Migdal, and then plausibly this would be the Yom-Suf of the Bible. So at this present stage of our work, we certainly have a site that would fit into the right time period. It's a military site. Whether it's the Migdal of Seti Renepta, Seti the First, that the Bible simply calls Migdal, or whether it's the next site a couple miles away from us. We'd like to be able to find that site. Unfortunately, the work of the canal irrigation project that's been going gung-ho with the bulldozers through the area, you saw some of the evidence of it. The area where we think it might be down on the bottom of this lake has been extensively excavated, and water is running through canals and so on at this time. So we may only be able to find traces of that. But in any event, we think we're on the right track. We think we're on the right track. We're certainly in the right time period. And we certainly have the kind of fortification that the Israelites would have tried to avoid as much as possible. But apparently there were so many of them that they probably couldn't avoid all of them. And perhaps up here is where one of the greatest miracles of history took place. Thank you. That, of course, is a question, but I don't think anybody questions that there were actually Israelites in Egypt who left and came to the promised land. Well, you should know Egyptologists tend to be very disinterested in things biblical. In fact, there's this wonderful article written by Monster Detox on the Exodus, and in which he was critiquing Donald Redford, who was my professor. But Redford wrote an article in a symposium in Jerusalem, and in which he was suggesting some interesting theories. And it was interesting to hear, because Monster Detox, world-class Egyptologist, archaeologist, starts off by saying, it's embarrassing for me as an Egyptologist to talk about the Bible. So Egyptologists tend not to have much interest in it. If you can probably attest to that, you can. There's, I think, and this is just my theory, if you go back to the dispute between Sir Alan Gardner and Edward Nabil about the identification of the so-called Israelite cities, Sir Alan Gardner was so vitriolic and hammering Egyptologists who were interested in the Bible that Egyptologists backed off. It had nothing to do with that. And I think they were just fearful of entering the field of integrating Egyptology and biblical studies. But it's true. If you look at some of the standard Egyptian histories, or the history of Egypt by Grimaud. Well, Grimaud, he does talk about that the ground type period is probably when the Exodus took place. He just mentioned this after.
Are you familiar with Alexander Newton's work?
Not much.
What are you familiar with?
What am I familiar with? Well, for those of you who don't know, Alexander Nibby is a lady who has some interesting ideas, and one of her ideas is that the land of Canaan is really to be found within the Eastern Delta, and so she has some very peculiar ideas that are not widely used with any sympathy by archaeologists in our know. But she has a few good things to say, but for the most part, she's on a hobby horse and not taken seriously. Is there some of hers you're particularly referring to?
I think she brings in a lot of evidence of vegetation differences over time. Idea of shipping in Egypt. There are a number of things she brings in.
Yeah, she does interesting things, but all of it is for her particular agenda. Now, put it this way. Her ideas were so spurred within the field that she had to start her own journal to get her stuff published. So, anyway. Sorry? Oh, yes. Yeah, that's hard to take it seriously. Yes, sir.
Are the lakes that you're proposing, do you envision those in any way an extension on the Gulf of Suez? Or?
Not the ones this far north. Perhaps the Bitter Lake to the south. I mean, if you read my book, things I said in there, I'm already changing on my ideas, largely because we now have new evidence. But the Bitter Lakes, at certain times, may well have been connected to the area between Suez today and the southern Bitter Lake. There is some evidence that they were connected. We do know that 4,000 years ago the ocean levels were higher than they are today, which would account for I see a couple things have happened. Nile levels have dropped, ocean levels have dropped in the last 3,000 plus years. So the area where we're digging this, we saw there's a branch of the Nile, it's desert there today, and the Bluesiac branch of the Nile, which was the main branch running north of where we are, that branch of the Nile was functioning as late as AD times. If you're familiar with the Medeba map in Jordan, the Mosaic map from the time of Constantine, Justinian, 6th century AD, the Mosaic branch of the Nile was still functioning in the 6th century. It's on that map. And so sometime between the 6th and 9th century, it's completely desiccated. So there's been rapid change. If you think about geological change that's occurred in the last 1,200, 1,300 years, that's pretty rapid change. To take an area that was green and delta and turn it into sand. It's very rapid change. But that's part of what I'm saying is that in order to study historical questions like we're asking, one has to look at the geology, the geomorphology of the region, and understand how it developed and changed in the course of time. Then we can say, well, here's some plausible scenarios, because here's where people could have traveled. You have lakes here and rivers here, and so we can eliminate possibilities.
What date do you prefer?
Well, I would say at the present time I'm leaning more towards the Ramesside date, but I'm certainly open to evidence that will go any other way. I think the problem is that the biblical evidence is the question of, do you look at 1 Kings 6:1 or do you look at Exodus 1:11? I mean, either way you have to say one of the texts we have to interpret one way if we want it to be 1447, or we have to assume that something has that the reference to Ramesses in Exodus 1:11 does not reflect the time of the event, but the time of that historical stage. So either way, you have to manipulate either text. So from my standpoint, the idea of the city of Ramesses being built does make very good sense in the New Kingdom. It seems less likely to me that it's the building of the Hyksos city of Avaris that the Hyksos would enslave fellow Semites to build that city. And that's the only other major city in the area. So that's what you have to do if that doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So at the present time, I would lean towards the 13th century. And it's interesting, in my book, I didn't really take a position. I sort of argued here both positions. And Alan Ballard, who a professor from the University of Liverpool, who wrote one of the words for the dust jacket, said that I made this brilliant case of the 13th century Exodus date. And I said, I didn't think I was, but I think in part the reason why it may look that way is that we have these canostatic papyri, 1 through 6, and they all come from the Ramesside period, and they give us far more information about the border forts, the geography, the toponymy of the region, and so on. So we have data for that period we simply don't have for the 15th century. So maybe the question, we just have to have a little more written evidence that helps us understand that period. So it looks like it fits. If we had comparable material for the 15th century, then maybe that would look just as good too. But the Egyptological evidence nudges me towards the 13th century. But, if my mind comes tomorrow that's going to change that, I'm very happy to adjust my view.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you coming and giving us the latest on this. Well, I think I can talk loud enough. Can't you hear me in the back of my head? And giving us the latest on these excavations. I'm glad you found someone to help you with the excavations.